Welcome back to Parley, the show where you folks support the other stuff I make by paying me monthly to talk about the topic of your choice, creating your own sort of custom podcast about, in this case, for DerpyTW, Space God Zandy. I mean, this is one of the most obvious parlays to ask, and I feel relieved that someone finally asked it. Derpy says, I've been playing a lot of Stellaris recently, which has got me thinking, Captain, if you were to be an immortal being, and you were the secret hand behind the scenes controlling all which is inside your space, knowing all that goes on there because of spies and informants, what kind of place would that be? What would my domain be like? Would it be some sort of democracy? So that the populace thinks that they're in control? Just get that one, get this out of here. No, stop. Okay, first of all, I'm just kidding. We'll finish reading it first. No. Would it be a true empire for complete control? Well, all right. That's got some problems too. Maybe your concerns are more monetary, opting to make your faction a massive megacorp. I like that the M in mega and the C in corp are capitalized, and it's one word. Very well done. Maybe you're some sort of hive mind or machine intelligence. Maybe if you go this route, your fundamental thinking is different, leading to potential political issues, especially if your society opts to cleanse the galaxy from the filthy meatbags that inhabit it. This is the right answer. Would you try to expand over maximum space, trying to get as many people and raw materials as you can, or would you try and maintain a small amount of space, reducing administrative issues, making what you do more efficient? Would you have subjects you brought to heel by either the carrot or the stick? The wording of this parlay is a lot of fun, Derpy, by the way. Granting protection for materials that can keep your own administrative channels clear, or would you declare a total war on the galaxy? A lot of prompts. I think that the fun way to answer this question for me is going to be to say my initial impression, then to talk about the pros and cons of a bunch of options, and then see if that changed what I would settle on doing. So I'm going to respond to quite a few, probably all actually, of those things that you suggested individually. But before that, I'm going to say my initial thoughts. We do need to define some terms, some parameters very quickly. It appears that I'm not merely to say that I am the ruler or like in the position of power of the society is not quite right, if I understand correctly. It's more like I'm the influencer or like the shadow council of this society. This society was more instigated by me, more an instrument that I'm directing rather than something I'm in charge of, you know? This has some important distinctions. It means that as a potential positive, there could be some greater purpose to the empire, if you want to say it that way, beyond something that motivates a society. There could be a more personal motivation for an empire. I'll give you an example in just a minute. But on the downside, I may be considered to be a relatively normal person most places. I actually personally don't think that's a downside, but obviously it means you can't just waltz into the royal court and directly, like, changes might take a little while. I think that the best way to take advantage of that situation is to choose a goal that doesn't need to be adjusted very often, if that makes sense. It should be something where my personal input is minimal so that time lag isn't as much of an issue. This way, I'm also safer. I have less direct control, less direct connections to the society, meaning that when it gets in trouble, I am relatively safe. So personally, I feel like there's as an obvious one, and it's to use it to test out models for good societies. I do this already. This is already me. That's why at the beginning of this parlay, I said, this is literally just the most obvious, like, this is what my Discord server already is. My career is already this thing. I just don't have enough power and influence to make it happen more places yet. But it's the thing to do. I mean, can we just stepping back for a sec? Folks, this world sucks. It's bad. Can we just... It's really bad. The human societies we have right now are very bad. They're really not, they are not good. They're bad. People, like, the earth is nice for the most part. There's some unfortunate things, but overall I feel like it's pretty nice. But human society is not good, and you can't just come up with a different mode of governance. You need, this is totally related to the parlay, I swear. You need, there's fundamental things about the way people think that are why we can't ever have a good society just by changing the structure of the society directly. We need to do something by which people are encouraged to have a mindset where there even can be a good society. It's kind of a minimum two-step process, or the things that would make a society good are not very direct. Like, you would have to try a bunch of stuff and see what influenced people to be a certain way. I mean, you could attempt to do a bunch of science, but the nature of humanity is a moving target, in my opinion. So you really need to just test it out. So let me give you a practical example. I want all these different city, state, planets, solar systems. I don't know how big these are, but a bunch of little things, relatively independent things, like the city-states of ancient Greece, maybe. Something like that. Imagine that. And, Athens is run differently from Sparta. Yes, this is good. And in Sparta, they have a certain type of dogma. In Athens, they have other dogmas, other values. And we get to look at what effect that has on the civilization and try to find things that make people less insufferable and terrible to each other. And we can try to include these things. And there's an important reason why we need to be a shadow overlord. And that is because many of these experiments might not seem good at first. Like a game developer, we may need to do things to a society that don't seem good, but maybe are good. You might be thinking, do we, though? I feel like that's what we already have. But let me give you another practical example. In Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, if you haven't read Brave New World, it was all right. If you are an English major in the United States, or probably a lot of Europe, you probably did read Brave New World. And it's about basically our society right now, in my opinion. But in near future, we've got designer baby technology gone wrong, and people are kind of genetically engineered into certain social castes, and it's bad. It's a dystopian piece of fiction. And there's a point in it, I don't think this is really a spoiler, but there's a point in it where they talk about how people were given the ability to not work. This society has gotten to the point where people cannot work. And it turned out that they were happier if they just did have to work. I believe that is not true. I think that's not true. I think the reason that is in there is to paint a picture of a certain way of thinking about humanity. I'm not sure I think that Aldous Huxley thinks that people really would be happier if they just had to work. Initially, this is true. I mean, definitely. I've spent a lot of my life resenting the way I felt kind of stuck in a society I didn't sign up for. I'm sure some of you can relate to that feeling. So I'm a person where if I don't have to work, I am happy. I've spent a lot of my life planning for what I will enjoy during that time. I have my own projects. I do not need to be given direction to be happy. I am not given any direction, and I'm happy. And I will be more happy once I feel like my work is more stable. But most people are not encouraged to create those values. Where I'm going with this whole gigantic tangent, because it isn't a tangent, this is the thing I want out of my galactic empire, is that what I want is to make a society where people want to have their own goals, are encouraged to have their own goals, so that they can enjoy a good society. If you made a society where people were given financial security and they didn't have to pay for things, they didn't have to work, if you made basically a utopia, current humanity would not be happy there. And that's bad. We should do something so that they can be happy there, so they can live good lives. Why would we not do this? Why do I want this, you're asking? Hold on. Zandy, you control like the entire universe or whatever. Can't you just make a small part of it where you do a census and find all the people that do have their own goals and just put them in one place, and then you can enjoy that? Yes. that we are doing that. But I would also like it, if it's possible, to just make everywhere be like that. Like, why not let people live happy lives where they are not insufferable to each other? What, like, wouldn't that be nice if we could just go out in normal society around people that were pleasant to be around? Wouldn't that be nice? You might be thinking, wow, you really hate people. Yeah. So this is what I'm doing. I'm not just going to stamp my foot like an impetulant child and say people should just be better. Meh, meh, meh. No, we're going to do something about it. Me disliking how people act isn't anything. The people didn't do anything wrong. The people didn't do anything. They just act this way because their society's forces push them to be that way. And I'm going to push them to be a better way that doesn't suck. This is what we're doing. So yeah, I mean, there would be a whole bunch, right? Like, there's going to be one where we try, like, people need to work. Again, we're artificially making things sort of bad to see about something, but we'll try to remove the, at the moment in the United States anyway, if people have to work, there's this scarcity, and you might argue that gives some people purpose, but none of that actually matters because the government is so thoroughly bankrupt, both mentally and financially. And so let's eliminate that variable, but see if people, like, you do still need to work, but the governance isn't just like inherently garbage. We maybe eliminate some of those people. I'm aware that politics isn't this simple, but how far do you want me to go with this example, okay? Anyway, so we're going to try that. We'll try one that is a utopia. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe if you just give people all the stuff, every state in the United States, I just live in the United States, so it's an easy example, forgive me, has not every state, every city has a factory where automatons automatically synthesize whatever you need. So when you need a car, you swipe your identity and it prints you the new car you need. And there's just a reasonable limit for capacity reasons on how often you can do it for large objects. So like, you can't get a new car for free more often than once every year or something like that. You can get, enough food for a day, and then you can get more if you want it, but only so much more. The idea being that you can even still indulge to some extent, just only within reason. You don't want to overload the system. You could even go to a neighboring city if there was like too much food commission there. There's a relative stabilizing effect. They could be connected by trains and send surplus to each other if maybe a farm had a bad yield or something. If you had a network of these things in every city in, I don't know, the United States, connected by railways or something, future railways, some whatever you want to do, you could let people just kind of get what they want. And I wonder if you put humanity now in that society, I said they would not be happy. You'd have to do something to make them people who could enjoy that way of living first, but maybe that's not true. Like, let's check. So we'll do another space colony that is that. And then we're going to do another one that's like extremely involved personality testing. If you've watched Psychopaths, like basically the Sybil system, and use it to find people. It'll like run the society and whatever, but the real reason is so I can get people for the Sybil system. No, is so that I can find people who, maybe do have their own goals, and we're going to study them. We'll give them a nice place to live and whatever. But I've always been haunted by the question of, I hope this is what you wanted out of this parlay, by the way, because this is what you're getting. Like, I don't know how else to answer this question, because you wouldn't understand why I wanted to do this if I don't explain. Are there things that people just kind of want that are sort of the same if they're given, a clean slate, nothing is distracting them or biasing them? Would we all be interested in feet if we weren't given some stigma not to be? Or is that something you need to be given a special reason to be interested in it, or you're not? Maybe that's an illusion in the first place, but I kind of think of it as being one or the other. Would we all like certain tastes better if we weren't horribly scarred by them? Maybe not all of us, but like more people. For example, a lot of people are kind of addicted to sugar. If people detoxed from sugar and were healthy and stuff, do people like massively different amounts of sweetness, or is that not really a thing and it's just an illusion created by our currently mostly very unhealthy diets? I don't know. I like it'd be cool if people had different preferences. In some cases, it might be convenient if we don't. I'm very interested in this topic, and it would help me understand other people better if I could see more people who were really actively investigating their own tastes in things. If people were given the time to do that, there's a bit of privilege there. I'm a person who has been given the time and resources to investigate these things, and so I don't blame people for not knowing this, but it would be nice if we did. Like, I don't want to be the only person working on that. I know I'm not, but it'd be nice if there were more people. So we're going to create like my home planet that's going to be, you know, the crazy people. It's going to be called Xandernesia, and we're going to drink a lot of tea. I don't know, man. Like, so that's my initial answer. I said we're going to do 3 parts of this parlay. You might have forgotten because we just went on a 15-minute tangent about influencing the nature of humanity to be less insufferable. But originally, I said I was going to talk about what I would do off the cuff. It would be that. I'd make a bunch of little different societies, seemingly unrelated, high level of security, with the purpose being to glean information about how to live a happy life as a human. Of course, this would also include other societies that are like, they really embrace mind uploading and putting yourself in the internet and that whole thing. And then we carefully contain those in case they get out of control. Something you wouldn't normally put a self-destruct button on a society like that if you were just that society. But I'm making people try this thing for research. And I would like to see, you know, how do people who have their own goals, who aren't just acclimated to, you know, being a human or whatever, who've really thought outside the box about this, how do those people react when made into an immortal uploaded consciousness? You know, maybe it's not as bad as we thought. You know, Derpy, in your thing, you said if you upload yourself or you're a machine intelligence or a hive mind, your fundamental thinking is different. Oh, I don't know. You know, it depends. Maybe we can make it so it isn't different. Maybe we wouldn't want to make it different. Maybe, I don't know. Let's see. Let's make a few dozen colonies like that and have them try it. And let's see how it is. We are going to look before we leap. It's going to be the look before we leap empire. That's basically what I want. Now, again, let's part 2 go through some of the things that you brought up as ideas. Really good set of prompts, by the way, in this parlay. Because you put so many in, certainly more than I need, but like, why not have fun with them and talk about each option, weigh the benefits. So let's do that now. But that beginning part is, I guess, my answer. That's what I would see as being the positive utility. Being beholden to a bunch of people is not necessarily good. I don't know. I think people's traditional idea of power lacks a clear payoff. But this situation, yes, there's definitely something to be gained here. I hope it makes sense what I think that is. Basically, I don't like this society, and I can make my own, but there's like no one in it, and I only get to try it one way because I only have my resources. I want to expand that, like a lot. Expand it sounds like to a city, like no, like to an interplanetary empire. All people, you know, behind the scenes, the reason is to test these different ways of having a civilization. Cool. Okay. So again, some of the things. I took a big dig at democracy at the beginning when I said, Derpy, you said, would it be some sort of democracy? So the populace thinks they're in control? Ugh, ridiculous. I do think it would be interesting to see what would happen if you gave a society a real democracy, like much more of a democracy, what I'm going to call a pirate democracy for the rest of this parlay. Piracy, pirate vessels, traditionally had a much flatter wage structure. People got a much more even share of the booty. And if you're thinking they did, that seems a little odd. Why would that be? Well, it's because the people who became pirates were motivated by the limited wages and bad working conditions on non-pirate ships, which were run by usually like commissioned nobles from the crown or whatever. And those people got the lion's share of the wealth from those voyages. So pirate vessels are going to have to be more equal, or there is no benefit. Like, you lose the protection of the law, however meager that may be. You know, you can't live in a respectable society. There's got to be some payoff, and there is. It's that you make more money. I mean, you know, with some risk. And the payment structure is more equal. Yes, the captain, the quartermaster, the carpenter, the surgeon, etc. These people might get paid more, maybe significantly more, but not anywhere near as disproportionate an amount as the the traditional sailing ships at the time, with no workers' unions or whatnot. Nowadays, pay is very unequal, but a lot of it is a lot more equal than it was, except when we talk about our gross billionaires and stuff. But by and large, there is a relative equality compared to that bad situation. Having more of a democracy, far more than anything that's really been called a democracy in modern times, would be interesting. Like, it'd be interesting to include that one. That's basically what we're doing here. Do I want to have a planet try these approaches, or do I think it's not worth it? Yeah, like a more actual person democracy sounds interesting. There's some other systems that I've always thought, like, maybe there's something there, and it just wasn't the right time. In Rome, they had that thing where it was almost like everything was jury duty. Do people not know what jury duty is? I don't know what countries have jury duty, so I'm going to explain what that is. In the United States, we every some amount of years, like I would say on average, like 5 or 10, you're up for jury duty as a sort of public service. You have to go in and be one of the impartial people on the jury, except that no one is impartial at all, for a trial. And usually you don't actually go. They call you and say, hey, you might be on jury duty tomorrow. Usually the next morning you wake up and they say, that trial's not happening. They settled it out of court or whatever. I don't know that much about the legal system, but this is basically how it works. I did actually go in. And so what happens after this, just for your own interest as a brief aside, is you sit in a big waiting room. When they're ready to call everyone in, you all go into the courtroom. So like hundreds of people, or like 100 people maybe, go into the courtroom. And you all basically promise to tell the truth and stuff. And then you're asked a lot of questions. And you raise your hands when, do you think that the judge and jury, the trial process is fair? Do you have a bias against this kind of person? And you raise your hand they ask you a lot of questions. They ask the whole group a bunch of questions. And the people take notes. And then in order, each of you, one at a time, is called up to talk to like the judge. And eventually it's also going to be to the lawyers on each side. And they're going to ask you to elaborate. You said you don't think that this process is fair. Could you explain a bit more? And I said, yeah, I think, this side or whatever, it's not very balanced. Like, that doesn't seem very fair to me. I feel like the fact that this person gets to argue that they weren't in their right mind or whatever, is more complicated than that or whatever. I'm just giving you examples of something you could say. And then the judge might say, okay, you seem too biased for this case. Get out of here. And then they let you go. You don't do the thing. But if all that goes through, which it almost certainly won't, especially even like young people, like my demographic, I'm never going to be chosen. So even if I go in, I'm like, I can make plans for the afternoon. They're not going to keep me. Eventually you might be on the trial, maybe even for a long time, for a few days. But this is something that hardly anyone ever actually does. Statistically, there just aren't that many cases that require it, let alone times you go in that there's actually a trial happening. Now, the Roman Empire did a thing that my limited understanding is kind of like jury duty for a lot of government positions, not just for the jury, if they even had juries, but for like a lot of positions. So there'd be, someone's turn would be up for being the, manager of the local farmland, and they had to organize that or something. Now, my immediate question is, well, it must be more complicated than that, because wouldn't most people not have the knowledge to do that job in any way other than a disastrous way? But the idea, however exactly it worked, I'm no history buff, but however exactly it worked, the idea is that you don't really make as many choices for your own gain, because you're not in the position for particularly long, or you don't have to make decisions based on holding that political position because you inherently never hold that political position. You're always going to lose it. It's not a career you have to hold on to. So you can make decisions that probably affect you that are just good for people. There really isn't any career incentive, is the idea in theory. That probably didn't really work, is my guess. I don't know. Roman history people, let me know. What do you think? But I think trying that out in a more structured society is not a terrible idea, for a couple of reasons. The first one is that you could have more people do more jobs. Having more people nowadays, for example, with our relatively higher level of education, more people could do more jobs, not a ton of government jobs, but they have the basic, mathematics learning and literacy and such that they could, do a variety of things. Now, I don't think, too, that they would really make amazing decisions, but I think the thing is that they would probably come to understand why bad things or things that frustrate them are that way. There'd be it could be a really good way to make people empathetic, is my thought. It might be a total disaster, which number 3 is why I can include it in my empire. And if that entire solar system society completely collapses because that way of governance doesn't work, not my problem. And that's what I get to say because I'm the immortal god emperor of Xandernesia. And there it is. So big democracy, yes. False democracy, no. Boo, boo. I think right now we have one of the worst forms of governments. There's a lot of problems. It isn't like really that meaningful of a democracy. It doesn't really matter who gets elected that much. You should vote, and you should vote for the person who isn't an inhuman monster. But like, it's not like that person is the person making the decisions, really. Their decisions are the result of the political forces acting upon them, and that shapes pretty much everything that's going on. Like, it's not their decision. It's weird to me when people say this person chose to do this thing. It's like, no, they didn't. Like, they had to do that because of the politics. I'm now going to say in every parlay we live in a society. So yeah, I don't know, that seems bad. I think there's a bit of an issue in our current society where there's no easy solution to this, but everybody getting a vote regardless of how much they know about the things they're voting on is not entirely good. I think there's no easy way, but letting everyone vote when it affects them is good. When people have no idea what's actually going on, or like if some corrupt president, just imagine, said, oh, I'm going to make the taxes lower or whatever, but what they're saying is total poppycock, and people who understand the situation know that. People who don't understand the situation getting to misguidedly vote for something they don't even want, but they just don't know they don't want it, is kind of bad. There's just no easy solution. So I don't know, like democracy in the form we have it, at least in the United States and a lot of other countries nowadays, is really bad. Like, I think one of the worst ways you could govern a society. It's not good. It could be even worse, for sure. But in many ways, I think this, especially from the cold, calculating ideological intrigue perspective of the space god Emperor Xandy, we get the least information with this form of governance. Like, it's not a useful example. We could just get rid of it. That being said, you could argue that it's a relatively transformative system. I feel like governments that use our current form of, if you were going to call it democracy, change a relatively large amount from time to time, which is to say at all. Like, they sometimes change in ways that kind of matter. Often bad ways. I'm sure you can think of examples in recent news, but that's my opinion. So politics and political theory aside, like, I don't really know any of these things, by the way. I'm not going to hold them against anyone. Whenever this topic comes up, I always like to say, you really should vote. The idea that your individual vote doesn't matter really can only be to your detriment. You're only worse off if you think that. There's no, you should vote. Everybody should vote. It doesn't matter who you vote for. If people, the statistics from previous elections in the US are pretty clear that me telling people to do this gets people who violate human rights less into positions of power. So please vote. It doesn't even matter if you vote for someone I don't like or whatever. That doesn't matter. Just go vote because this system is really messed up. We didn't even get into like the obvious thing is like the voting system is just needlessly inferior. There are way better voting systems that are not like that complicated. They're not hard. Even just ranking candidates in order is dramatically superior to the system we currently use. That it's not hard. This system is bad for no reason. But that's how it ended up. And it's easy to craft a society. It's not easy to get a society that already is a way to a different place. So fair enough, that's why it is that way. Political aside end. But that's what I'm gonna have to say about most of these things, like the true empire where you have complete control. No, this is bad. This encourages people to be rebels, even if it isn't that bad. Like I think it will encourage rebellion. I'm gonna say that's a no-go. Concerns being monetary, no, money doesn't matter. I do think that the whole megacorp thing could be useful for technology. If we don't have, you said I'm immortal already, but if we didn't have, immortality stuff, I mean, this question would be boring otherwise. The answer would automatically become, you make everybody research how to live longer, because nothing matters when we die, so why not just, anyway. But you handily avoided that, which in my mind removes most of the benefit of creating like a big corporation. Now, you probably do want really focused research because there's going to be a sort of bigger weapons diplomacy thing here, especially in space. It's all about the speed of travel, in my opinion. And so, again, I already probably have like slow influence on these societies. Making it so word can at least travel quickly it seems pretty important. So, keeping up on technology like that. The hive mind thing. Yes, this has interested me for a while. What if we are already that? Dream research would probably have come a long way already. Maybe this is unnecessary, but there's a way to think of your left brain and right brain as being kind of different different versions of you that kind of cooperate to a certain end. And I'm pretty interested in that idea, in the idea that you and somebody else working together as a single consciousness might be surprisingly effective and not actually that different from what we currently experience. I don't know. Again, we can just go test it. To me, that's the main benefit of having this shadow empire. Is we can instigate that somewhere without it directly affecting me, which, yes, that's very evil, but I don't care. This is a parlay question. I feel like maybe I should have acknowledged that earlier than 32 minutes into the answer, but what are you going to do? The political issue thing, you mentioned the fundamental thinking being different. I don't know. Again, I'm not sure I'm convinced it really would be. I mean, my fundamental thinking is already different than most humans. I already don't think that most people's values make really any sense. I know why they have them, but they just seem wrong or they're needlessly inefficient. Or like I get why they won't change their mind, but there's no solution except to just do it. They don't want to try new things, but the only thing that will make them happy is trying new things. And so, like, I get it. You feel like you don't have the energy, but there's just no way forward except to do this thing. So why not just do it? And yet people don't. So I don't know. Derpy, I think for that one, you make a good point. That could be an interesting thing for a separate parlay, but you're asking the wrong guy. Like, I already have unrelatable desires. Me being an uploaded consciousness hive mind would not make my desires like I already can't relate to most. There's already political problems. Did you hear what I said before? So I don't have too much more to say about that. It could be a whole complicated thing. Why are my desires different? What is the map of like, why did my desires end up this way? Why are other people's that way? That could be a whole thing. I've already gone on way more than enough tangents in this parlay. I'm having fun with this one. Okay, so quickly addressing some of the other ones. Expanding over maximum space. Yeah, make it big or make it small. I think having them be relatively independent and big and kind of separate, like not a united entity, is good. And just having them be entangled in alliances and having it be unknown publicly that these nations, these space empires, are all kind of unified. Like if somebody attacks, I'm going to force them all to work together, and suddenly there's this like big united front, but they don't appear to be at first. I believe that's quite advantageous, as long as there's a few of them that are like small but have scary, Cold War armistice-inducing, armaments, so that there's not just a war because it looks like there's no big empire. As long as you have that as a deterrent, I feel like having the network of civilizations I control not appear to be united seems good. So my answer is both. I'm not sure that's allowed. Expand over maximum space, I guess, but not each individual like entity. I want them to seem separate, basically. Great detail. And administrative issues. Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing you need to do, like, there's a whole separate topic, which is how do you get from here to there? Everything you've described, but how do you get there? The first thing you would need to do is that thing I mentioned before about finding people that have that are like operating on the same game theory level that I am. Not because it's the smartest or whatever, but simply because then I actually know what's going on with them. When they make a decision, I'm operating on the right level of thought. Go look up game leveling in chess. The idea of like a level 1 move versus a level 3 move, and how operating at a lower or higher level, too low, too high, can be kind of bad if you're interested in this topic more. But you can't metagame if you don't know how much the other person is metagaming in a PvP scenario. Your metagaming is much more effective if you know what level the person's operating on, whether high or low. That part doesn't really matter. What matters is knowing where, in my opinion. And especially when dealing with humans. So getting to work with people, to put them in administrative positions that are in that place with me, means at the very least I will understand where they're coming from, which I think is more important. The leaders of all these societies it's probably better to be on the term of a friend or a relative equal, or like a different but respected colleague's position. And I'm going to have to find some kind of cover position that affects all of them, like eternal life psychologist or something. I don't know. What would be a good, you know what I mean? So I can just kind of see them in normal everyday life in person on the face, and then also have quieter influences. That seems good. I don't know. Not sure how to do that though. We're not declaring total war. But the final thing I wanted to mention, I don't think I need to explain the total war thing. I want things to be good. I just don't like the method. I'm willing to, if you want to make an omelet, we're not going to waste eggs. But if we need to have a society be a way we're not sure is good to gain crucial information for the future of all humanity, I don't think that's so bad. I'm not going to make a society be a way that I think is bad. I'm just going to make them be ways that I think could be good, but I'm not sure, because no one is sure. I don't think this is that bad. Do you think this is really evil? I really don't. Anyway, you said something at the end that I liked. It reminded me of One Piece. You said, you could have subjects are kind of like fiefdoms that you grant protection to for materials or to keep your own administrative channels clear. In One Piece, this is not really a spoiler for One Piece, but one of the, I think, pretty interesting things about One Piece that I wish got more screen time, although it doesn't get a small amount, is like the balance of power. Again, I don't feel this is really a spoiler at all, although it is a detail about the world of One Piece. It's not really hidden in any way. They just kind of explain it more later. There's some warlords, which are pirates sanctioned by the government to maintain a balance of power. Think like Yakuza or mob bosses that cooperate with the police to some extent, because it's better to kind of have that power balance in place, if that makes sense. So there's the warlords, which are pirates kind of colluding with the Navy. There's the Navy, which is like a world totalitarian government. The evil United Nations is how I always think of them. Maybe the United Nations is already evil to some people, but I don't particularly think so. They're a very evil United Nations. And then there are the four warlords, who are the four emperors, the seven warlords, the four emperors, the Yonko, Yong for co-emperor, in this context, and the Yonko have this thing where you'll go to a new island as we explore the world in One Piece. This fun thing of like we go to the next island, and there might be a flag of one of the Yonko flying over that location, that island, that city, that territory. The idea being that they're protecting it, and there is a sort of turf war where they don't necessarily occupy the locations, but it's part of their territory, and that confers some benefits, some protection, just some influence. Luffy is, through a lot of the series, a person who will go to places and declare, I like you guys are my friends, and I'm such a trigger happy child with extremely skilled fighting companions that if people attack you, I'll just beat them up. And so you can understand how having characters like that bouncing around the ocean deters people from attacking places, even though they're not really there in any meaningful way. There's just kind of a precedent of, like, you don't want to mess with those places. And when Luffy and the crew get to the second half of the Grand Line and we start seeing this a lot, I think that's a fun part of the show where suddenly there's this, it's true to life, that it's like you're interacting with politics whether you like it or not. You can't just do things in one of these places and have it be, you're like, oh no, I'm not trying to make a statement or anything. It's like, but you are. Like, you're strong and you like these people and would protect them, but there's already someone doing that. You can't opt out of having that effect. That's just a thing you're doing. And so I think that's appealing. It seems like a good way to be connected to territories and have this kind of gradient where there's some places I'm not directly controlling or influencing. There's places further back that are just entangled in a way. I think that making places more independent, more divided, is a good way to go. Not more divided like, emotionally, but I mean allowing places to have their specialties and culture, having these things be independent and having some mechanism by which that is protected seems good. In the game of empires, I've always thought about how you win as a species, not how any individual faction wins, but if I just want reality to be good, what do we do? And I wonder, at the moment in real life in the world, I would argue what's happened is that we've entered kind of this weird stalemate where, because we have an interconnected global society, there's kind of a political mutually assured destruction where nobody can really do these big flashy things anymore. And in the unfortunate conflict between Russia and Ukraine, we're kind of finding out what happens when there is a conflict despite that stalemate, which has been thoroughly unpleasant. I'm not trying to say otherwise. That's the worst result, is peeling back the curtain and we get to find out, like, but does that really work? Or does that just make everybody unable to act? And the answer is we don't know. We're learning a lot through a very unfortunate situation. But I wonder, is this a good approach? Is having a centralized unit that deters good? Is that a good approach? You don't have to agree that is what we have right now, but you could interpret it that way, or you could interpret it as being that there's just a bunch of large bodies that, threaten each other so nobody makes any big power play or anything. You could argue that people are making big power plays, however you think of it. But is this a good attempt at a method, a structure for universal governance? Not just for a single nation, but for everybody. What is a good way, if you're the arbiter, what's a good way to arbitrate? You know what I mean? I don't know if I have an answer to that for this parlay, but that's something that's on my mind. Maybe having there be a sort of soft power thing is better. I don't know. But you might have been thinking, oh, it's going to be a huge empire. And I think that's bad, and I don't know why. I mean, you gain less data, sure. But anyway, that's what I think, and I'm not sure I can fully explain why that is. That's my thought for now. I'm not an experienced statesperson. I'm not way into the politics, so that's just what I think. I hope it was interesting. An upstart's attempt at being the immortal god emperor. What a wonderful question.